Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, upgrading windows to help curb appeal and keep homes efficient. More at callmosby.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Michael Politte spent 23 years in prison for the murder of his mother, a murder that experts now suggest he did not commit.
I feel like in a lot of ways they disregarded a lot of evidence, like my mother's fingernails. They never tested a rape kit. Why would you not test a rape kit of a woman who's just murdered?
That was Mike speaking in 2021. Mike won parole a year later with the backing of the MacArthur Justice Center and the Midwest Innocence Project. Today, he's still fighting to clear his name. This hour, we'll hear how Mike is doing since his release. We'll also talk with the juror who helped put him in prison. The juror, Linda Dickerson Bell, is now fighting for his innocence. Just yesterday, she organized a rally at the Washington County Prosecutor's Office to request that the prosecutor pursue a wrongful conviction case. But first, to better understand Mike's story, we'd like to bring you excerpts from a St. Louis on the Air 2021 audio documentary that examined his case. The next 12 or so minutes of this story include details that may be upsetting to some, including descriptions of a murder scene and a reference to an attempted suicide. Here's Sarah Fensky.
On the night of December 4th, 1998, Rita Politte went out to a bar with her friends. Rita was a newly divorced mom living in Hopewell, Missouri, a rural area about an hour and a half west of St. Louis in Washington County. She came home around 11 p.m. with sandwiches for her 14-year-old son, Mike, who then went by the nickname Bernie. They were joined by Mike's friend Josh Sansui, who was sleeping over. The two teens ate the sandwiches while Rita checked her answering machine. Then she said she was going to bed. Not long after, the two boys did the same. It was a normal evening in every way. The two boys slept in Mike's room, but both Mike and Josh have said they woke up early the next morning, just after 6. Mike says both immediately noticed the smell of smoke.
And I threw the blankets off of me, and I went to my door, and I opened my door, and there was a wall of smoke, and it was white. As we're running through the corridor from my bedroom, I have a straight visual shot at my mom's bedroom, and I could see an orange glow. When I called out to my mother 3 or 4 times, I didn't get an answer. At that time, I tried to run towards her room, and I was standing up, so my eyes were burning. I was starting to choke, and I turned back. I ran outside, catch my breath, and I seen a yellow water hose. And as I'm grabbing the water hose, I see Josh coming from the left side. I asked him to turn the water on, and I grabbed the hose, and I run as fast and hard as I can through the living room. And when the slack gave out, I dropped down to my knees to see what I could see. And I seen my mother's legs. I seen blood. And I seen fire from her, essentially her waist up. And I don't know how long I was there. I turned the water hose because it was a brass nozzle, one that you turn, and it sprays wide. And the more you turn it, the narrower the stream gets. I turned the water hose on, and I had it pointed towards the fire until I ran. And I ran out the house. I ran out the front door. And I seen Josh, and my cousin Leanne Skiles was hanging out at her door. And I said, "My mom's dead. Somebody killed her," or something to the effect of, "I'm going to get the motherfucker that did this." And she ran back in her house, and me and Josh ran back down to my house. And I remember talking to both my sisters from in the back of a patrol car. I remember being in like an ambulance or a fire truck or something, and an EMT lady was shining the light in my eyes, and she was looking down my throat, see, I guess, how much smoke I've inhaled or whatever. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of movement. I remember seeing my 2 sisters. I remember seeing my Aunt Patsy. They were reaching for me through the window of a patrol car, and they were reaching for me, and I was trying to grab their hand.
So you were there in a patrol car. When did you realize that they were acting like you were a suspect?
I don't think I realized that they were treating me like a suspect until they were actually interrogating me.
And was that pretty soon after. That was part of that same day. I mean, there was no going to bed between the fire and when they started interrogating you.
When Kurt Davis drove me from the scene to the sheriff's department, I asked him if he was going to be able to find out what had happened to my mom. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if her throat was cut or something, would you be able to tell that? Are you going to be able to find out what happened to my mom? And they used that against me as me trying to interpret whether or not they're going to be able to find out what I did. And that's how they used that against me. And it was an innocent question. Are you going to be able to find out what happened to my mom? And they used it against me. Looking back on it, at that moment, they were considering me as a suspect, right? But I didn't realize that they were considering me a suspect until after I wrote a written statement about the events of the 4th and the 5th. They gave me a CVSA test, a stress voice test. I answered all their questions. They asked me, did I murder my mother? I said no. Do you know anybody that would want to murder your mother? I said no. They told me I was lying. They would ask me again, go over the details of what happened. And I would relay the same set of facts and the same set of circumstances. Okay, Bernie, now tell us what really happened. And again, I would relay the same set of facts. And at one point, I think as I was in the county jail, I actually counted these. I think it was 26 consistencies amongst me and Josh's statements.
And they even tried to tell you at one point that Josh had turned on you, right?
Yeah.
They lied and said that Josh had said you did it.
Yeah, they said that. It was a tactic they used. They would put their badge at the edge of the desk in front of me. At one point, they asked for my shoes during the interrogation, and they took them outside the room. He said, the shoes are evidence. I'm like, evidence of what? Well, evidence that you murdered your mother. I didn't murder my mother. And they played this. It's almost as if they were trying to convince me that I did something. All right, that's what it felt like, because every time I would get to the point where I would say I woke up, I seen smoke. No, Bernie, no, go back. Like they wanted me to fill in a gap for them, and it was like they were trying to convince me that there was a gap there,
And they kept coming at you. I mean, they came at you for about 48 hours. And you mentioned this voice stress analysis test. They said you exhibited significant levels of stress. I mean, looking back at that, you got to think you had a number of reasons to be stressed out at that point.
Well, I just found my mother burning to death on the floor at 14 years old. To the best of my knowledge, there's not no literature or how-to manuals how to handle that. But apparently the Washington County Sheriff's Department has one. I've yet to read it. Right, but it's their opinion that I acted strange or acted funny. Sheriff Ron Skiles, he said that I didn't act the way that he acted when his mom passed. I'm sorry that he lost his mom, because I know what that's like. But I would like to know the circumstances of which he lost his mom.
So they ended up arresting you, and pretty quickly.
They arrested me December 7th, 1998.
So this is basically 48 hours later.
Mm-hmm.
You begged the officers to take your fingerprints.
I did.
Because you said somebody was trying to frame you for something you didn't do.
I did.
You felt like if they could just look at your fingerprints and compare that to what was there, that you'd be exonerated.
I offered everything. I cooperated with them to the point where they just didn't want my cooperation anymore. As a matter of fact, when they wanted to re-exhume my mother because they had failed or forgot to take her fingernails, my attorney at the time, Wayne Williams, said, Bernie, we can object to this. I said, don't. Because I'm trying to give them evidence to exonerate me.
And so what would be under her fingernails might be DNA from the person who killed her.
Exactly.
You're looking at this like a chance to get to the bottom of this.
Yes. Justice for Rita.
Rita's funeral was the day after Mike was arrested. He attended the service in an orange jumpsuit with feet chained.
I was in leg irons, and it was very emotional. It was very. I think even then I knew that she was the only person that would have helped me in this situation. And I knew I wasn't going to win.
Mike has never changed his story about what happened that morning. Neither has Josh. That's even though the boys haven't seen each other since that day. And that's even though law enforcement charged Josh with a pair of unrelated crimes in a bid to get him to cooperate in the case against Mike. Josh didn't waver. At his trial, prosecutors claimed Mike had once, briefly, confessed. They pointed to a day 1 month after his mother's murder when Mike made a suicide attempt while in custody. They claimed that he said, quote, "I have not cared since December 5th. That's when I killed my mom." Mike has always insisted that is not actually what he said.
The day I tried to kill myself, I was overwhelmed, right? I was done. I had enough. It felt like this was the only way out. And at that time, I tried to tie a sheet to the vent as I'm sitting on the toilet. I got it tied around the vent, and I'm tying it around my neck. And just as I get it tied around my neck, they all rush into my cell. They set me on the bed, and they was like, "Man, what's going on? Why are you trying to kill yourself?" I said, "I haven't cared. I haven't cared since they killed my mom." And it's really frustrating when law enforcement is there to uphold the law and protect us, really. And courts understand that, and they give their word, I think, at times more credit than what it deserves. Because a law enforcement officer or person, by my case and my experience, can say, he confessed. We heard it. This is what he said. With no recording, no signature, no laid out detailed events of the crime, just he said he did it. And that's upheld in the court of law in Missouri.
Prosecutors offered Mike a deal, plead guilty, and he'd do just 15 years in prison. He'd already spent nearly 4 years in jail waiting for trial. If he took the plea, he'd be out in less than a decade. He turned down the deal. He said he wouldn't plead guilty to something he didn't do.
They did offer me a plea bargain. They offered me 15 years for voluntary manslaughter.
And that would have included time served.
Time served. I would have been home probably in 2008. I'd have been home about 12 years ago.
Were you tempted at the time to take that?
No.
Looking back on it now,
No.
Is there a part of you? No. No part of you?
Nope.
I mean, you would have been out in 2008.
No, I'll die in here. I didn't murder my mother. And she's going to get her justice.
We're listening to excerpts from a 2021 St. Louis on the Air audio documentary about the story of Michael Politte, a Missouri man who spent 23 years in prison for a murder that evidence suggests he did not commit. He won parole in 2022, and today his attorneys, as well as a juror who helped put him in prison, are fighting for his innocence. When we come back from the break, we'll look at what happened at Mike's trial and why experts say the evidence used to convict him wouldn't hold up today. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
Mike Politte refused to plead guilty to his mother's murder because, he said, he didn't do it. It was never even an option to him. So 4 years after Rita Politte's death, Mike went on trial for her murder. Mike didn't testify at his trial. He told his lawyer and the judge at his sentencing that he'd wanted to, but his lawyer was a public defender without much time to devote to the case. He told Mike he wasn't prepared for him to testify. Mike's lawyer wrapped up his part of the case in less than half a day. The jury found Mike guilty of second-degree murder. 4 months later, in April of 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison without the chance for parole. Such sentences have since been found unconstitutional for juveniles. The Supreme Court ruled that kids' brains are immature. They don't fully understand the consequences of their actions, and they deserve a chance to change. But that wasn't the case in 2002. Mike was 18 years old when he arrived at the Fulton Reception and Diagnostic Center. That's a maximum security prison in Callaway County. In prison in Jefferson City, Mike recalls that moment.
Well, it took time to adapt because there's a certain way you're supposed to carry yourself, and there's a certain way that you're supposed to move in prison, and it takes a while to fully grasp what those strings and what those moves are, right? Especially being so young, everybody's got their eyes on you, and including predators. There's a lot of sexual predators in prison. And that's in part what I was fighting for. So it takes a lot of mental strength to adapt at that young of age to this kind of life with these kind of people.
And were you thinking at this point, I'm innocent, somebody's going to figure out a mistake has been made, I'm going to get out of here?
The only thing that, and this is what's unique about the situation, is that I was still relying on my father, even though I had my thoughts about his possible involvement. But I was still reliant on my father to try to help me. I guess the family did make him hire a lawyer after I was convicted, and it was Margulis out of Clayton, Missouri, and they did my direct appeal. And he informed me that and assured me that he hired the same lawyers to file my 2915 to further my appeals. And roughly a year and a half goes by, and I'm not hearing anything from any lawyers. They don't accept my calls. So I had a friend email Arthur Margulis from Margulis & Margulis Law Firm and asked them where my case was at. And they shot a letter to me and pretty much told me that they don't represent me, and they haven't represented me since my direct appeal. And that was the end of my relationship with my father.
And so that had to have been, even beyond the betrayal from your father, which is a horrible thing in and of itself, the idea that you'd lost out on getting to do this appeal because you didn't realize it wasn't already underway. How did you even deal with that knowledge?
You really want to know how I dealt with it?
I do.
Heroin.
And you could get that in prison.
You get that in prison, yeah.
Did that mess you up?
It did, but in a way, it clarified things for me. All right, like it put me so far on rock bottom that when I was done, and it came from. I wrote a letter to Renee Murphy, my very first public defender. I wrote her and I asked her for help. I told her the situation. And she wrote me back pretty immediately, and she said that she doesn't do post-conviction litigation, but she gave me a sheet that had a bunch of Innocence Project websites on it. And within 4 months, a gentleman named Kim Blucker and about 6 law students come down to visit me.
And this was finally a group of people that were willing to hear what you'd been saying.
It was my chance. I left that visit, and I paced myself for 4 days. I wore a hole in the floor, right? And I'm reliving everything that I told him, and I'm reliving the expressions that I'm seeing as I'm telling my story. And they were just disgusted. They were just in awe, and they were just, you could see in the faces of how did this happen? And from that moment on, I knew that I had help, and I knew that they were going to get me out of here.
Mike says that after that day, he never took heroin again, and the Midwest Innocence Project did take Mike's case. Even though Mike was just 14 when his mother died, he was tried as an adult and given an adult sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Megan Crane is the co-director of the MacArthur Justice Center's Missouri office, which joined the Midwest Innocence Project on the case last year. So you've mentioned the sole physical evidence they have here is the shoes, and that the shoes allegedly had gasoline on them. How important was that to the state's case? Could they have won this conviction without that, what we now know, false evidence?
No. I would argue this case may have never even been brought to trial without that evidence. They had no physical evidence, any direct evidence, any even other circumstantial evidence other than that gasoline.
John Lentini dug into that alleged evidence from Mike's shoes on behalf of his attorneys. John is a forensics expert and a past chairman of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences Criminalistics Section. He wrote the book on fire analysis in criminal cases. Literally, it's called Scientific Protocols for Fire Investigation. John Lentini says there was no gasoline on Mike's shoes. Shoes come with a variety of chemicals on them, particularly tennis shoes. For 25 years, investigators have known that shoes are, quote, problematic evidence in arson cases. Scientists discovered this problem in 1996, 2 years before Rita Politte was killed. But John tells me those findings didn't get much publicity until years later.
And so we did a paper called The Petroleum-Laced Background, which was published in 2000. So in 1998, if you didn't go to the Nashville meeting or read the abstracts, you would not know that shoes were so problematic.
Okay, so now I'm looking at the timeline of this case. The trial was actually in 2002. If the prosecutors were paying attention, should they have known by then that this was a problem?
Prosecutors don't pay attention to scientific papers. The chemist who did the analysis should have been paying attention. But even so, 2 years is not a very long time in the greater scheme of things. It takes a while for advances in science to percolate through the community so that people get the idea that maybe we need to be careful with shoes.
Today, we have tools that distinguish things that look like gasoline from real gasoline. In this case, the chemists for the state didn't take those steps. They found, quote, aromatic solvent, not gasoline. Even so, John Lentini says he would not be surprised to learn that someone is still in prison because of this type of error.
There's lots of people in prison for crimes that they didn't commit or crimes that never even happened.
But looking at this, if this was the only physical evidence, was this kind of testimony, that would indicate to you a big problem.
Yes.
Well, so looking at this case, you were brought in after the fact to look at this science. It sounds like you feel pretty strongly this science is not science that should have been used to convict Michael Politte.
That's correct.
Even beyond the physical evidence, experts say the investigation was flawed in critical ways. Jim Trainum is a former Washington, D.C. police officer with 27 years of experience, 17 as a homicide detective. He examined the entire case file at the request of Mike's attorneys, and he notes that Sheriff Ron Skiles zeroed in on Mike from the start.
And, that there was reason to, as Michael was one of the last people in the house. However, he based his conclusions solely on the way Michael was behaving. And he was projecting how he thought he would behave onto Michael, even though his experience was nothing like Michael was going through. And this is something called false consensus bias. And there's so many cases out there where the wrong person, especially juveniles, have been wrongfully identified as suspects based on this sort of projection.
The killer likely would have had blood on his clothes or on his body. Mike didn't. Also, the autopsy found that Rita Politte had been killed with a blunt object before she was set on fire. If Mike was the killer, he would have had to quickly hide the weapon somewhere, even as his friend Josh slept in his bedroom. That object has never been found.
That was part of a 2021 audio documentary on the story of Michael Politte, a Missouri man who spent 23 years in prison for a murder that evidence suggests he did not commit. Mike won parole in 2022, and he's still working to clear his name. When we come back from a break, we'll talk with Mike. We'll also hear from a juror who helped put him in prison and is now fighting for his innocence. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Eileen Cha. I had a chance to catch up with Mike yesterday about how he's been doing. I started our conversation by asking Mike how it feels to see Linda Dickerson Bell, a juror who sent him to prison, now fighting for his conviction to be overturned.
It feels good to know that I have a fighter in my corner that was a part of the process that is fighting that hard for me and fighting that hard for justice. So it's pretty amazing what she's been doing. She's always pushing and pushing and pushing, and she won't let it go. And you need that in a wrongful conviction case.
Have you met with Linda since being released in 2022?
I incidentally ran into Linda at a mutual friend's birthday party. It was a couple of years ago, and I recognized her, and she recognized me. And I gave her a hug, and we talked, and I tried to give her some kind of comfort that I was doing good and that I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing on my end to ensure that justice is given to my mother. And she gave me the same sentiments that she's had a hard time really living with the outcome of the verdict, and she don't like it, and she's fighting back. What she's doing it means everything to me. I mean, without what she's doing right now, there wouldn't have been voices in front of the courthouse screaming, "Exonerate Mike, justice for Rita."
Now, Lamar Johnson spoke at the rally, and Lamar was freed from prison in 2023 after serving 28 years for a murder he did not commit. Mike, while you and Lamar were incarcerated at the Jefferson City Correctional Center, did you talk much about your cases?
Yeah, we talked back and forth about each other's cases and what we're going through and the fight that's ahead of us. I spent a lot of evenings walking the yard with Lamar, just talking about how messed up our system is and what we need to do to fix it, and what can we do? What can we do to fix it? I mean, we were two people in the same situation fighting for our lives, and you kind of develop a unique bond when you're fighting the same struggle.
Mm-hmm. Now, Lamar has been fully exonerated. His conviction was overturned. Does his case give you hope, Mike?
No, absolutely. Every case that's been overturned gives me hope. I was in the courtroom when Lamar got exonerated, and that was exciting, and I felt it for him. And I hope one day I get to feel the same exuberation as he did that day of being fully free.
So you're working now, as I understand, as a general contractor. You're going to school. What has it been like to spend time with your family?
Oh, it's fun. I love being around them. I travel a lot, but on the weekends I'm around them, and we hang out. I visit. And
these are your sisters and their kids?
Yes.
How many kids are there?
There's Rianne, which is Crystal's daughter. There's Aiden, and there's Caleb, which is both my nephews are Melanie's kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you do with them?
Oh, me and Aiden, we play video games. We play Xbox.
Okay. I remember the last time you were on the show, you talked about that love of gaming. So you're still playing video games. Are there new ones that you have discovered?
Rocket League. I like playing Rocket League. That's pretty fun. That's probably my favorite. It's my go-to.
Okay. Can you remind me what that is? I've heard about Rocket League lately, I think. It's
soccer, but it's cars instead of people.
Yes. My son was just talking about that the other day.
Yeah, it's a fun game. Mm-hmm. Very addicting. Very addicting.
In the time that you have been on parole, what has that been like for you?
It's been, parole is parole. I want to say that it's been great, right? Mm-hmm. But where I came from, it is great.
Right.
Right, but the matter of it is that regardless, I'm not free.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yes, I'm out here and I'm working and I travel, and I get to enjoy the company of my family and friends. But in the end of it, if my conviction is not overturned, I have a life sentence, which means I have a lifetime of parole, which means I have a lifetime of checking in with a parole officer, a lifetime of getting travel permits so I can travel to and from work. I'll never be able to vote. I'll never be able to own a firearm, go hunting or whatever. There's so many things of having a felony conviction on your record that it holds you back in so much aspects of life that you can't be fully productive under the guidance of the state of Missouri or any other state when you shouldn't be.
Right. And this threat or the possibility that you could be put back in prison at any time, are there times at which that is especially difficult?
No, it's difficult every day. But every day I try not to think about it, right? Because I don't do anything I'm not supposed to be doing. But that's not to say that a traffic ticket won't land me back in prison. Because if I have any kind of run-in with law enforcement, if I'm in a traffic accident and any kind of run-in with law enforcement could get me violated, it would be at the discretion of the parole officer and the parole board whether or not they send me back or not. Don't necessarily have to be breaking any laws to get to be violated. So, you know, I try to go about my life and my daily life not thinking about it, but it's impossible not to think about it.
You know, to clear your name, either Washington County Prosecuting Attorney John Jones IV will need to pursue a wrongful conviction case, or the United States District Court, Eastern District of Missouri would need to act on a habeas petition your attorneys filed in 2023. And then there's also the chance that Missouri's governor could grant a commutation. What does it feel like to have your fate in others' hands?
Quite honestly, it don't feel very good, especially when you know those people don't give a shit. Excuse my language. But.
Oh, no. Yeah. Let's keep it real here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm relying on politicians that are there for themselves, right? Like, how often does somebody step up, do the right thing without being pressured, right? Those are the people that I respect. Why should we have to pressure you to do the right thing, right? Why can't you just do it? Because that's what your job is, and that's what your duty is. So it doesn't feel good to have people that you rely on to have the fate of your life in their hands, and they don't give three shits, right? It's not a very good feeling.
So through this process,
let me finish this. That is a feeling that will drive anger, and that is one of the reasons why I've had to compartmentalize everything that's ever happened to me and focus on my life moving forward, right? Because I have a lot of anger built up because what happened to me is fucked up, right? Yeah, I'm angry about it, right? But there are things in life that you just can't do. And you cannot sit idly by when you see that a 14-year-old kid was wrongfully convicted. And let me just say this. The same people that they used to convict me, 20 years later, they say they made a mistake. File an affidavit. Sign it. We made a mistake. And the same people that was paraded into the courtroom says we made a mistake in 1998, and these courts won't listen to them. Is that something that's right? Is that due process? Is that?
Yeah.
You know, it's frustrating. I'm getting angry now thinking about it. Right.
Right. Well, and for very good reason. I mean, Mike, you're talking about how you cope and live your life in the best way that you can. And you mentioned compartmentalizing. What is it that also helps you to manage the the anger, resentment, the indignation, if we can call it that, over what you have been through? And is there some way that you channel that somewhere?
Yes, I channel it. I channel it to work. I went from. I'm still a carpenter apprentice, but I'm a general foreman. I went from life in prison, getting out, having family. That's it. Getting a job in 2 months in the carpenters union, going to school, putting my work in, and I got an opportunity within 3 years to become a general foreman and run work. That's pretty successful. That's how I channel it, right? I will not do. They may defeat me at this, but by God, I will not be defeated at anything else in life. I promise you. And everything else in life, I'm just gonna show them through what I do and my actions that they're never gonna kill me.
Mm-hmm. What is it that gives you hope and drive to continue?
Well, justice for Mom first and foremost, right? If I'm still convicted, then there's no follow-up investigation. There's nothing. It's a case closed. Mike did it. He's convicted. That's it. I get exonerated. Now they got an unsolved case. Now my mom's murder investigation's open back up. Maybe they'll actually go investigate something like they should have did 20 plus years ago. So that's another issue that it helps drive me. But at the same time too, I still compartmentalize that because I still have to do what I need to do every day moving forward. So it's a balance between finding justice and moving forward. Because what if there's never justice, right? That's an opportunity. I mean, not an opportunity, but that's a possibility. There's a possibility that there's never going to be justice, right? If I don't compartmentalize that, if I don't separate that, then if I put all of my hopes and all my dreams and all my aspirations that I will be exonerated and it doesn't happen, that could kill me.
So, Mike, I believe that it was your mother Rita's birthday last week. What do you do to keep your mom's memory alive? How do you remember her?
Oh, I remember her laugh. Yeah, I always think about her laugh. And we bought some stone angels from an antique, and we take them to her stone every year. And then the family that actually mows the grass is like distant relatives of ours, so they collect them. Once they start cutting grass, they collect them, and then we take them back out there the following year.
What do you think your mother would say to you about the fight that you've been fighting and the life you're living now?
Oh, she'd say she's proud of me and she loves me. No doubt.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you are most proud of now, Mike?
Well, I'm proud of a lot of things. I mean, my ability to transition the way that I did, that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, right? Because it was, coming out of prison from 14 years old to 38, that's a feat, right? To try to gather yourself and figure life out here. That's when you've never lived an adult life. That's a struggle. I'm proud that I still maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy, responsible lifestyle, and I try to do everything to make Mom proud. Right? I mean, I'm kind of living where she's living through me.
Yeah. What will you do if you are exonerated?
Good question. I haven't thought that far yet. I honestly haven't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I don't put it past what's happening today. People ask me, "What are you gonna do when you get out, Mike?" I don't know. I'll have to figure it out when I get there. And that's kind of how I go about life. Is that I take it as it comes, right? And I deal with each situation as it's presented, and that's how I move forward.
Mike, thank you so much for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
That was Michael Politte, a Missouri man who won parole in 2022 after spending 23 years in prison for the murder of his mother, Rita Politte, a murder that evidence and experts now suggest he did not commit. Joining us now to talk about her efforts to see Mike Politte's conviction overturned is Linda Dickerson Bell. Linda was a juror in the case that sent Mike to prison, and she's now fighting for his innocence. Linda, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you for having me.
Linda, you organized a rally that took place yesterday at the Washington County Prosecutor's Office. What was it for?
Basically to get his attention, because the emails over the last year, the visits to his office, the request for a visit with him to just kind of go over the case and see if he has any interest at all in taking it on, have fallen upon deaf ears. Mm-hmm. And so I thought perhaps maybe this would get his interest.
And how was it that the prosecutor or the people there at the office, how did they respond yesterday?
Oh, they're always kind and they're generous, and they're apologetic because they know he has zero intention of speaking to me. So, yeah, I feel sorry for them, but I'll continue to visit there. I'll continue to do whatever it is. And if it's making a nuisance of myself, then I guess that's what it will be.
Mm-hmm. Now, we did reach out to the Washington County Prosecuting Attorney's Office for comment on this case and whether they plan to pursue a wrongful conviction case on behalf of Mike, and they have not responded to us.
I would imagine it would be hard to comment on something that he hasn't invested any time in looking into, so I'm not surprised about that.
How many people were at yesterday's rally?
So there were about 25 people who were actually stood there and took part in it. With that being said, there were several people that came by and hollered out and honked and did all of the things that they do. There were several people that also had business that apparently they did inside the courthouse and then stopped and visited afterwards. Mm-hmm. And then there was a couple of people who stopped and asked about signing a petition. That petition was not something that I had or was even a part of, but I'm very interested in finding out if that's perhaps something that needs to happen, because I'm not a constituent of Washington County, and so perhaps that's one of the reasons he doesn't want to meet with me. I don't believe so. But if that's the case, then a petition it will be. We'll get a petition gathered. We'll get lots of residents of Washington County. And if nothing else, we'll get him out of office whenever it's time for his time to go.
Mm-hmm. And was there anything that folks who came out said to you about why they came?
They came because it's important to them. Some of them came because they love Michael. They knew him as a child growing up. They know for a fact he did not commit this murder. Several people had their own ideas of who did commit the murder, and that's not my job. Mm-hmm. That's Mr. Jones's job.
Yeah.
So I let that be. But yeah, there were several people that just wanted to show support for Michael, and there were also several people that just wanted to show disgust for Mr. Jones.
Mm-hmm. And why do you have the sense that the Washington County prosecutor does not want to meet with you?
Well, I've been asking since January of 2023, and it is now, April of 2025. So it's an assumption, but I think it's a pretty good one.
Yeah. Linda, why is this work important?
Well, because I took 23 years of this young man's life. For 23 years, he sat in prison. The murder happened in 1998, and 2002 was the trial. I was a juror on the trial. We came to the conclusion, and it was not a conclusion that I ever felt good about. Mm-hmm. I was often told, don't trust your gut, don't trust your heart, go with the evidence. There was one piece of evidence that was given, and that was gasoline on Michael's tennis shoes. That has since been proven was not true. There was no gasoline on Michael's tennis shoes. That was the only piece of evidence that I could have slept with, knowing that we convicted the right person. Now, knowing that that is false evidence, I cannot live with what we did to this young man. And I'm not the only juror. Unfortunately, I'm the only one that's willing to stand up.
Mm-hmm. And how many other jurors have you spoken with thus far?
So I've, by text or voice, I've spoken with one other juror, and then I in person met with one other juror whenever we did the 48 Hours episode. But other people have reached out. Other people have signed affidavits that I've since been aware of. Several people in their affidavits singled me out, saying that we knew she didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But we were able to convince her to finally go along with it so we could get out of there. And please don't think I just did that like in a second. It's not like, oh yeah, whatever you guys think. That's not how that took place. Mm-hmm. I held out as long as I could hold out. Unfortunately, I was not really prepared for what happened in that room that day.
Right.
But with that being said, It is what it is. It happened. We convicted the young man of murder. I now know that that is not a fact, and I will not stop fighting until he is exonerated, or at least until John Jones reviews the case and comes up with his own opinion, which I have very little confidence in him, even if he forms an opinion, because I've heard some things that he said that's gotten back to me secondhanded, and he doesn't seem like a very reputable man.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is one of the things that happens when you live in a
Small
community.
town, unfortunately,
right.
yes.
You mentioned people saying, don't worry about what your gut and your heart are saying. Was what you had learned about what was thought to be, those chemicals, the gasoline on the shoes, was that the turning point for you in listening to what your gut and heart were saying?
Probably so, because up until that point, I tried my hardest not to listen to anything that would come up. Occasionally, things would come up on the TV or the radio. Tried not to be involved in those things because I had prayed to goodness that sometime someone would reach out to me and want my opinion, and I never wanted to confuse what I knew with what I heard. And so, but I could not avoid that. And it wasn't really just hearing it on TV; it was seeing it. I mean, I have document after document. I actually read the report, and I got physical proof, evidence from an expert witness that says Michael Politte did not commit this murder.
Yeah. It's clear, Linda, in some of the past conversations that I've heard with and from you, that you carry tremendous guilt
100%.
Around your part in convicting Michael Politte of murder, now that you have more insight into how he came before the court to begin with. But there's anger, too.
100% anger.
Does some of that come from the feeling that you were used as a tool by a system?
We were absolutely used, yeah. Unfortunately, Mr. Wayne Williams was a new public defender. The state thought they had a sealed deal. It was a 100% case they didn't have to worry about. So just those two combinations together, they just utilized a jury and used us to get what they wanted. And why can't people just admit when they're wrong? Trust me, it's not easy. My husband even says, Linda, wouldn't it have been easier just to keep your mouth shut? Oh, yeah, it would have been easier, but it wouldn't be the right thing to do. I lose sleep over this at night. And until we can resolve this, until we can get Mr. Politte his life back with exoneration, not just the fact that he's out of jail. Is that important? Yes. But just as you heard him say, and I'd never heard him say it before, but that's often what I say, he's not a free man.
Yeah.
And I want him to be 100% a free man the way he should be, because he did not commit this murder.
Is there an image or a scene that plays and replays in your mind from the day that the sentence was handed down to him that keeps you going, that motivates you to continue in this fight for his innocence?
Yeah, it was me having to stand up and give that, is he guilty or not guilty, and me breaking down when I finally went ahead with it. Because I can tell you that from all of the other affidavits, people really didn't know what I was going to say. And I'm not surprised, because I wasn't even sure. Was not sure.
Yeah. And just in our last minute or so, how has this experience affected the way that you think or feel about our justice system?
It's failing. Tremendously failing. I can't say that they're always wrong, but I can tell you in this instance they got it wrong. And the fact that they're not willing to make it right just makes it absolutely disgusting to me. So I have very little faith in a lot of them. And it starts from the bottom down, bottom up. From the police officers who failed to do a proper investigation to the defense attorney who failed to do proper investigation. I mean, if you look at the two affidavits that he filed, he says if he had a chance to do it differently, he would. At least he's a man enough to admit that he didn't do everything that he could have done.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate Mr. Wayne Williams for that. John Jones, not so much.
Yeah. Linda Dickerson Bell served on the jury that sent Michael Politte to prison, where he spent 23 years for a murder that evidence and experts suggest he did not commit. She's now fighting to see that conviction overturned. Linda, thank you so much for making the drive to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me. And I'll be just right there with Michael. I will not quit fighting.
Today's episode was produced and edited by Emily Woodbury. The 2021 audio documentary was produced by Emily and Sarah Fensky, with audio engineering by Emily and our executive producer, Alex Hoyer.
Podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.